It is my favorite time of the day, which is actually almost night. It is twilight, which means it is time for a campfire story. We are going to be doing some campfire stories, and this is one of my favorite things to do during the summer, and all of the stories that I'm going to tell are tales that I heard around a campfire myself. So, some of them are a little silly, but campfire stories usually are, and we're going to start with one that is kind of more on that silly end of the spectrum. And this is the story of a young man who was born with a strange peculiarity. He was born with a golden screw where his belly button should be. And it was very bizarre. Doctors had not seen anything like this before, anywhere. And he was healthy otherwise. There was not a thing wrong with this kid. And so they decided that it wasn't doing him any harm, so they would leave it there. And as the boy grew up, he realized very soon that he wasn't like other kids, and he was very self-conscious about it. So if he went swimming, he would always wear a shirt. He tried to keep it hidden because he was a little bit ashamed of it, a little bit embarrassed. And as he grew older, he wondered more and more about why he had this golden screw where his belly button should be. And it sent him on a lifelong quest to try to discover the answer. So he started by doing a lot of research and reading a lot of books and going to libraries, looking for any kind of medical oddities, and there was nothing like it in any of the literature. And he was tired of looking in that realm and thought maybe if he could tap into some of the wisdom of some of the wisest people on the planet. And he had heard there was a very wise man in Tibet, in the mountains, who could answer anyone's questions. So he planned for this trip, and he was going to need to, have the gear and be able to go up in the mountains and brave the weather and all of the hardship. And it took him a long time, and he finally made it to that mountain. And at the top of the mountain, there was this little kind of a cave, but you could tell that it was a dwelling. Someone lived there. And he just knew this had to be where this man lived. And so when he went through the opening, he did see that there was definitely signs that it was someone's residence, and there was a little man sitting with his back to the opening of the cave. And as he approached, he was going kind of quietly. He didn't want to disturb the man. And the man never even turned around and said, "I've been expecting you, and I know what you want." So he was a little intrigued by this, and he said, "Well, yeah, I've traveled many miles to see you." And the man said, "You want to know about the golden screw." And he was just floored. I mean, there was no way that this guy who lives by himself in the mountains could have had any clue that this was the reason he was there. And he'd never heard of anyone else who had this strange thing. So he knew right away that this guy was going to be able to tell him something. So he was just elated. And he said, "Yes, please tell me, why do I have this? What does it mean? What's it about?" And the man turned around finally and looked at him, and he had long hair and a long white beard, and he looked very wise. And he said, "There are some secrets which do not permit themselves to be told, but there is a place where you will find your answer. It is in the desert." And he gave him the best description of where he needed to go. And so he didn't get any other answers from the old man other than this, but he already knew that this had to be the place where he was going to find those answers he'd been looking for his whole life. So he finally made it out to the desert, and it was a terrible journey. It was hot, and he was very thirsty. Even though he had water, he'd really drank most of it already. And in the distance, he could see something shining, and he thought, it's got to be a mirage, because he hadn't had enough to drink. But he was drawn to it, and he went further and further and got closer and closer, and what he saw just amazed him. There was a big screwdriver just in the middle of this desert, just kind of floating, and right there it was perfect. In fact, he noticed that it was the exact size that would fit where the screw, where his belly button was. So he immediately grabbed the screwdriver and it fit perfectly. And he was very excited, so he started turning the screwdriver and faster and faster and faster, and he could feel the screw was loosening up and it was starting to come out. And he was just so excited, and he's turning this thing faster and faster and faster, and the screw was almost all the way out. And it finally, he turned a few more times and the screw came all the way out and his butt fell off. And that, my friends, is the story of the boy who was born with a golden screw where his belly button should be. Told you it was silly.